Welcome everyone to this election funding advocacy and early voting advocacy training. Tonight's training is sponsored by NC Black Alliance, NC Budget and Tax Center, Common Cause North Carolina, Democracy North Carolina, the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, You Can Vote, and Blueprint North Carolina. So we are delighted to be here to provide this training to you. I do want to note that this training is strictly nonpartisan. All of our organizations are nonpartisan, and this training is 501(c)(3) compliant. We do not support or oppose any political party, appointed member, or candidate. So tonight's training is separated into two parts: election funding. We'll talk about how you can advocate for um, funding for your county. Uh, Everything that happens with elections has to be funded. That includes poll workers, the staff at the Board of Elections, the polling sites, the machines, all of that has to be funded. We'll talk about that. And then early voting. And Early voting is really, I think, an essential part of our voting process. And there are many, many benefits to early voting. We'll talk about that. So, as we get into things, um, I know some of you already put where you're joining us from, so continue to feel free to do that. And we'd also love to know what brought you to this training tonight, um, and what you hope to learn from tonight's event. So. As in past years, our organizations are continuing to partner to monitor election budgets and advocate for funding in this critical election year. And our staff and volunteer County Board of Elections monitors, many of you who are on the call, are have helped us in getting information about election budgets and what's going on. So, um, and no matter where you live, all 100 counties are currently discussing, debating, and in some cases, deciding how your elections will be funded this year and next. And likewise, some counties have already begun discussing early voting plans for the 2026 general election, and many will discuss their plans in the coming months. So, um, one quick thing here, if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to be monitoring the chat throughout the evening, so uh, put your questions in there. So without further ado, we are going to get started with early voting, and I'm going to turn it over to Marquez Thompson with Democracy in North Carolina.
All right. Thank you so much, Tyler, and thank you each and every one of you for being here again. And so I'm curious to know how many of you have, as Tyler was saying, have helped us already with early voting advocacy. And so if you want to put that in the chat just so we can get a understanding of the depth of experience that we have here today. So through this training, you're going to learn or be refreshed on why early voting matters, the process that happens when county boards decide early voting plans, what makes a good early voting plan, and how you can advocate for one. And again, we hope this training will serve as a refresher for returning volunteers and that you will learn about new resources and strategies that will help you advance your advocacy. And for those of you who are new, we hope that you will leave feeling energized and ready to advocate for strong early voting plans and build strong relationships with your local county board of elections, both the staff and the members. And so to talk about why early voting matters, I'm going to pass it to Michaela.
Thank you. I'm happy to see everyone here today as well. And so we're just going to take you all through a scenario. We want you to imagine that you're at your local county board of elections monitoring a meeting in which they're discussing early voting plans for the upcoming election. Now, your county has a history of providing 2 to 4 early voting sites. And one board member says they are against early voting and moves to have only one early voting site. The board member says, I'm against early one stop voting. I don't understand why, for convenience sake, we open it up to the possibility of someone coming in and changing what the votes are. Eliminating early voting is one step closer to shutting down faulty voting. We can have better control in just one early voting site. Everything is contained in one spot where we have control. Is it an inconvenience? Yes. It's a disadvantage for the majority of the Republicans. It
It
gets
gets
an
an
extra 15 minutes travel time. And no one has told me that they cannot get out of work on election day to vote. This was an actual scenario which took place in Surry County in 2022. The quote comes from a former Surry County Board of Elections member. It's important to note that there is no connection between early voting and voter fraud. I'm going to say that again. It's important to note that there is no connection between early voting and voter fraud. In both midterm elections and presidential elections, early voting is the most popular way to vote in North Carolina, and it's only become increasingly popular over time. And in the general election in 2024, we saw that 74% of North Carolinians voted early, the highest percentage ever. And early voting isn't just about convenience. There are so many reasons why early voting is essential to increasing turnout and protecting votes. Early voting reduces long lines at the polls on election day. Early voting means more opportunity for all voters, including those that might have irregular schedules or transportation challenges. And one of the most common reasons why an in person voter's ballot may not count is due to voting at the wrong precinct on election day. And early voting helps to eliminate that concern. And third, early voting offers same day registration. Over 100,000 North Carolinians used same day registration in 2020. The younger the voter, the more likely they are to use same day registration. Many young voters are registering for the first time ever, and they're more likely to change residencies. Every time a voter moves, they need to update their registration. And once the voter registration deadline has passed, they can only update their registration during early voting. So, as you can see, accessibility to early voting sites have a major impact on voter turnout and who's able to vote. Now, I'll pass it over to Chris to talk about who makes these decisions.
Thanks, Michaela. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Shenton. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm Senior Counsel for Voting Rights at Southern Coalition for Social Justice. And it's great to be with you this evening. So I'm going to talk a little bit right now about how early voting plans get passed into use for every election. So the law in North Carolina makes it so that while there are lots of people who have the ability to give input, including the paid county elections staff, like the director of the Board of Elections and the other people who are involved in the day-to-day work of running elections in your county. The main decision makers for early voting plans are the members of your county Board of Elections. So those five people are the ones who vote on and decide how many early voting sites to open up, where those sites are offered, and what hours the county is going to have their sites open for. Um, the legal framework is pretty simple. In the first instance, every county board of election gets to decide for themselves what they think will suit the needs of their county and their county's voters on all three of those questions: where the sites are, how many there are going to be, and when those sites are going to be open within the 17-day early voting period that's allowed for required in state law. The kind of baseline is that every county needs to open at least one site at the County Board of Elections office or nearby. Um, and the first day of early voting is on the two Thursdays before the election, and the last day of early voting is on the Saturday before the election. There are required hours for that last Saturday, but the other 16 days are discretionary. The county boards can decide when their sites are going to be open. When the county board is deciding on an early voting plan, uh, two things can happen. That vote can be unanimous or it can be non-unanimous. So everyone can agree on the plan, all five members, or there can be disagreement, votes for different plans um, that different members think would be best for this particular election. If there is a unanimous vote, if all the members agree, then that is the plan that will be used for the election. So if all five members agree on a plan, that's the end of the discussion. That will be the plan that is used for the election. For this fall, that'll be for the general election. If there is disagreement over what the best plan to be will be, that's when the conversation turns to the state board. Where there is disagreement at a county board, the state board of elections steps in a supervisory role to help decide where there are going to be sites. Usually, in that context, although not always, there are two competing plans that a county board will submit. Sometimes one has three votes and a different plan has two votes. That's often referred to as a majority plan and a minority plan, respectively. But there's no limitation on the number of plans that can be considered. More than two plans can be submitted, and any member of the county board of elections can submit a plan for the state board to consider for their county. The state board has a few requirements. They're required to look at whether or not the county's plans are providing adequate coverage for the county's electorate. And they're also required to ensure that the plans do not disproportionately favor any party, racial or ethnic group, or particular candidate on the ballot. Um, the state board is also not limited technically to the plans that are submitted, although almost always we find that they choose between at least elements of the plans that have been submitted from the county board of elections. In large part because the state board is not as familiar with all 100 counties as members of their individual county boards of elections are going to be, and so they defer to the local knowledge in many cases. Um, so these plans are often crafted by the county board members themselves. Like I mentioned, every county board member can submit a plan, even if it's only them who thinks that's the best plan. But they often get input from the staff, and they often get input from constituents, people who come and raise their voices and speak up about what they would like to see in their early voting plan for their county. More on that in a minute. Um, so when you are thinking about how to engage on an early voting plan, we encourage you to think about all of those different possible people as potential allies in kind of working towards the things that you would like to see in your community's early voting plan and the needs that your community has around accessibility and availability of early voting sites. So you want to think about talking to staff, think about talking to individual members, think about speaking up at county board meetings. All of those are options to help you push for a robust early voting plan in your county. In the past, we have even gone so far as to help board members craft alternative plans. And so it's important to let them know that if they are a little bit overwhelmed, that we can help, that you can help connect them to resources that can help them draft, that you can yourself propose things with them. Um, don't disempower yourself. All of these things are options that are available to you. Um, We like to think of these different players as targets for possible advocacy. The primary targets are going to be your county board of elections members because they make the critical decision in the first instances that in most cases does decide where the county is going to have early voting sites. But there's also secondary targets. That's those members of the county staff who have big influence on where the early voting sites go. Sometimes the state board of elections members themselves can be secondary targets. And if it is the case that a county submits a non-unanimous plan that then goes to the state board for a final decision, all of a sudden that secondary target of a state board of elections member, that's your primary target. That's now the person that you want to talk to about what your county needs. And yes, Sailor, thank you for pointing that out in the chat. It is important to know that all of these people are appointed, not elected officials. So these are all public servants who have been appointed to serve in this role and thus need to make sure that they're listening to the people who they serve, who didn't necessarily, or in any case, vote for them to serve in that role and nonetheless have a responsibility to um, the communities that they are making these decisions on behalf of. This year, there are even more county board of elections new than normal because of some changes in how the state board and county boards of elections are appointed. There are lots of people who have never gone through this process before. Typically, when a county board of elections is making an early voting plan, they will look to a similar election in the past as a precedent for what they have done, as a kind of baseline to figure out what's a good starting place for a plan. So this November, we have a midterm general election coming up. The most recent comparable election is going to be from the 2022 November general election. So that is the starting place that a lot of county boards will use as the building blocks for their plan for this upcoming fall. Um, but that doesn't end the discussion. That is meant to be a starting place, a precedent that you can use. Many counties have grown. Almost every county has had significant changes in its turnout patterns and habitation patterns in the last 4 years. What does that mean for your county? It means you should not be looking at 2022 as the only thing that is possible. If there are new things, new changes, new communities in your county that need more service, closer sites, um, whatever the case may be, you know your community best. Don't be afraid to speak up and push for that. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that most effectively a little bit later in the training. The bottom line is, though, it's important that we're making sure that every community in your county is getting the opportunity to vote early without an undue burden, without too much trouble. That is what the system is designed to do. That is what the legal duties require the county boards to do. And that is what you should be pushing for as an advocate. This year, county boards have until July 24th to submit early voting plans to the State Board of Elections. So all counties are going to be making these decisions in the next 3 months. Some of them are even making that right now. But again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now I'll pass it to Caitlin for a little bit more about what makes a good early voting plan for each particular county.
Thanks so much, Chris. Good afternoon, y'all. I'm Caitlin Metzger with You Can Vote. As we talked about, and the data shows, early voting is very popular, right? And so we want to make it as accessible as possible. Several things, several factors go into what makes an early vote a good and sound early voting plan. Some of them might include things like convenience, right? A good early voting site, convenient early voting locations, especially for young voters and student voters, if you have those in your in your county. What you probably saw happened in the primary this year in March. Several counties could not agree on those campus early voting sites. And we did see proposals that include Elon University in Alamance County, UNC Greensboro, and A&T for our Aggies in the house in Guilford County. We also saw Western Carolina University in Jackson County as in the proposal. None of those sites were approved, right? On the county level, the county boards. Um, a site at the Mars Hill Library, which was in walking distance to Mars Hill University, was also not approved in the March primary. For this upcoming general election for 2026, campus voting sites will likely be a point of discussion, right? If you're planning to go to your county board of elections meetings, you're probably going to hear about these things again, especially in those counties that made those changes in the primary, like Guilford, Jackson, and many others. So that's one factor for convenience for young people. Another factor is robust weekend hours over the entire 17-day early voting period. In North Carolina, our early voting period for the fall is 17 days long, which does include many weekends, right? As Chris mentioned, the requirement is only that final Saturday, which this year is on Halloween. So if you're ready to go vote and wear your costume, you can do that because all sites are going to be open on the final Saturday. That's the only required one. However, counties can make the decision, and we want you to advocate for more hours over the weekend, which can include 2 additional Saturdays, and Sundays, if that makes sense for your community. It's important to advocate for those additional weekend hours because that's often when people have the time to go vote, especially folks with 1 or 2 or 3 jobs. In recent years, many counties have implemented and offered more Sunday voting hours, sometimes for the first time. However, unfortunately, again, this March primary in 2026, several of those counties which had provided Sunday voting in the past chose to not offer it again. Those counties included Gaston, Lenoir, Pitt, and Randolph. Sunday voting in the primary was also proposed in other counties like Brunswick, Columbus, Craven, Greene, Harnett, Pitt, and Wayne. And those were gone, those did get accepted through non-unanimous plans. However, um, the State Board of Elections did not approve Sunday voting in some of the counties that they saw come up in front of them. In order for Sunday voting to continue, it is crucial for people like us, for advocates like you, to let County Board of Elections members know how important it is and then use it, right? Additionally, if your community secures Saturdays and or Sundays, additional opportunities during early voting, it's really important to make use of that. Plan marches to the polls, all those kinds of things during those times. The more people who use early voting, especially on weekend hours, that's going to help us next year and the year after and in future advocacy opportunities to show that people want to vote on the weekend, right? And so that will be helpful in the future. Another thing to consider is that satellite voting locations for early voting options should be considered to serve historically underrepresented voters, including Black voters and other communities of color. It's important that early voting sites, are located in places where they can accommodate different demographical populations. And this means having sites located in areas where all different kinds of groups of people live. Um, During the discussion for that same Guilford County early voting plan, which did not choose the campus sites, additional sites were proposed in places like Barber Park and Washington Terrace Park. Those are sites that are important for the Black community in Guilford County. And ultimately, neither of those sites were approved on the county level. Barber Park is a site in eastern Guilford, Greensboro, which has historically been used by Black voters who live close right there by it. And in the general 2020 election, over 89% of the more than 6,900 voters that use Barber Park identified as non-white. Likewise, the Washington Terrace Park site located in High Point does serve predominantly a Black community. Where possible and when possible, early voting sites, which are close to public transit lines and have adequate and accessible parking, including curbside options, and space for poll workers to park and get inside to do their jobs. All of those are important things to consider when you're looking at sites. So, as Chris mentioned a minute ago, you can look at past sites to see what sites were used in 2022, 2018, and also keep in mind these other factors that can help make a great, robust, accessible early voting plan. Now I'm going to pass it right back to Chris and talk about some of the ways that you can advocate for these plans.
Thanks, Caitlin. Um, First off, can you advocate for these plans? Absolutely, yes. That is what we want you to do, and that is what we are here to help teach you how to do. There's three steps that I'm going to give you, and I'll go into a little bit of detail on each. But let me say up top, if this is something that you want help with, all of our organizations on this call would be thrilled to help you work through some of this in your own county. So the first thing I'll say is if you want help advocating for early voting sites in your community, if you want help doing research to figure out where there have been sites, where the data might support an additional site, what strategies and tactics you can use to get sites in certain areas that are sometimes more controversial than others, please, please, please reach out. All of our organizations would be thrilled to help you do that. There'll be some ways to get in touch with us at the end of the presentation, but I cannot encourage you enough to reach out to us. We would love to help. Um, but how do I advocate for a good early voting plan? Comes down to three steps. First, you want to gather intelligence. You want to get your information. Second, you want to organize. And third, you want to follow up and problem solve. So what do I mean by each of those things? Gathering intelligence. First, you're going to want to find out what's going on. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, the deadline for counties to submit their early voting plans to the State Board of Elections is July 24th this year, but that's the only deadline that is firm for them. Everything else is up to the county's discretion. That means counties could start as soon as right now. Some of them have already started their processes for selecting early voting plans for the 2026 general in November. Some of them will get started very soon. Some of them don't intend to start until June. But you don't know what that is for your county until you ask, until you find out. So the first thing you can do is go on their website, see what their meeting schedule is, see if they have agendas posted for any of those schedules. Some of them will, many of them won't. If they don't, that's not the end of the conversation. The next thing you do is you call. Give them a call during their business hours and say, "Hey, I'm a resident of the county. I'm interested in the early voting process. Um, I was wondering if you could let me know what is the plan for the county board to make that decision? What date do they intend to discuss it? Are they accepting public comment ahead of that? Will they be publishing a proposed plan in advance of the meeting? Ask them to do so. I would like to see it. I would like to take a look at it so that I can give feedback on it to the board at the county meeting. Get all these pieces of information. The most critical one is, when is the board going to be doing this? You cannot influence the process that you don't even know when it's occurring. So you want to know when it's happening. Then you want to ask them what they plan to consider. What is the process? Are you going to have that public comment? Are you going to ask the public for input about where there should be a site? Are you reaching out to the private sites that you've used in the past to see if those sites are available? How is that going to be made? How are those decisions going to be made? And then another thing that you'll want to ask is, is the board considering opening sites on a Sunday? Is the board considering opening sites at a college campus that's in your community, for example? Those are two that have been particularly controversial lately that we know from past experience are really helpful for helping voters get out and exercise their right to vote in the early voting process. So those are all great questions to ask. You want to confirm the meeting date, confirm the time, confirm the room that it's in. A lot of the county complexes have a lot of different conference rooms that they could be in, and you want to make sure you're in the right one. So just get all that information, and they should be happy to share it with you. Sometimes they're not as forthcoming about posting that information on their website as they would like, but calling them will work. It will get you the information you need. If it turns out that they're holding the meeting to discuss early voting on a date that you're unavailable, that's okay. You can still submit comments. Figure out what the best way to do that is through email. You can sometimes email the director. Sometimes you can email all the members of the board directly. Ask the county board if they have a preferred way to receive public comment. But there's a lot of different ways that you can still make sure you're heard. And if you want to go to ccnc.me/your, YOURBOE, you'll find contact information for your county board of elections that can help you do all of these things. So that's gathering intelligence. What's the next step? The next step is organizing. Um, how do you organize with that? Simple. You share what you've learned and you start asking people what they think. You tell other people, "Hey, this meeting is going to be next Tuesday. I would love it if you can come with me. I want to advocate for additional early voting sites. I want to advocate for Sunday hours in our community because I know we would use that." Ask other folks what they think about having an early voting site in a particular place that your county board has proposed. Or if they proposed removing a site, ask folks what they think about that. You want to start a conversation about, what is my county board of elections proposing to do, and how will that affect me and my community, the people that I live with every day, that I work around, that I care about, that I want to see exercise their right to vote effectively? What do we need from our county board of elections, and is this early voting plan giving us what we need? Start that conversation. And then as you start having those conversations, it will become clear if you're getting what you need. Oh, there's no early voting site in this part of the county, and that makes it really hard for us to get out there. Great. Sounds like you might want to start looking at options for proposing a site in that part of the county. Or even, you don't have to have all the specifics. Specifics are good. Specifics can be helpful, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But you don't have to say, "We need a site in the south part of the county, and I have a high school gymnasium that you can do it at, and I've already talked to the principal." Sometimes that's really helpful, but effective advocacy can be as simple as, "We don't have an early voting site in this part of the county, and we need one. It's hard for people here to vote at the sites that are offered, and we should have one that is more accessible to them." That is good advocacy. So share what you need, talk with your friends and family members about what you need, and then make sure you tell the county board of elections. The best place you can do that is by attending the meetings and giving public comment. But like I shared before, Written comments are also good. Try and bring people with you. Bring people of all different stripes with you. Bring people from your faith community. Bring people from your school, from your work, from your neighborhood. The more people who come with you from more different walks of life, the more effective that advocacy will be. Because what it will show your county board of elections is that lots of people care about this, that this is something that is important to the community, that this is something that they should be doing in order to make sure the community is well represented and well served by the election systems that are, at the end of the day, supposed to be there for them to, for you and your community to express your voices effectively. Um, This is especially important to bring this kind of coalition of people when you are talking about things that can be more controversial, like Sunday early voting hours, like an early voting site on a college campus. If you're talking about an early voting site that hasn't been used before in a midterm election, if you're talking about expanding beyond what the county has done in the past to better serve the residents of the county. One note of caution, it's really important that when you are advocating for your county board of elections to do more than they have done in the past, that you have a good reason to believe that those sites or those hours will be used. It can set a really bad precedent when advocates push for expansion of services, which costs money, which costs time, and then that expansion is not well utilized. That can make it difficult to get those changes in the future, and it can make it so the county boards will be resistant to ever expanding services in the future. So what you want to do is make sure that you're asking for things that you know your community will use. And you want to show that by building a coalition, building consensus around those needs. But that is not meant to say don't ask for things. If your community needs something, you should ask for it. You should just be honest with yourself and with each other about what you need and what would be helpful and not push for, I want 100 early voting sites for my community. That'd be great. But if they give you 100 and those all 100 don't get used at a rate that would justify them in the future, that's obviously going to be a thing that's cited against expansive early voting access in the future. And the last step, so we've got gather information, we've got organize, and now you want to follow the process and you want to solve problems. Um, when you go to the county board meeting and you say what your community needs, that is an awesome step. It is not the end of the process. The end of the process is your community actually getting what you need. And what does that entail? That entails following up, keeping the pressure on, making sure that they know this is not something that you decided to do on a whim and then forgot about, but this is something that you and your community care about and will follow through on and want to see happen. One of the biggest ways you can do this is a lot of county boards are resistant to, let's use an example, Sunday voting hours. County boards very frequently are resistant to offering Sunday voting hours for lots of different reasons. Some people just don't think there should be voting on the same day as church. Some county board members think it's too hard to staff sites 7 days a week. Some county board members just think there should be a day off. The best thing you can do if you are pushing for something like Sunday hours is to say why you need it and then work to solve the problems. A classic example with Sunday hours is it's really hard to staff Sundays because my staff want that day off. And they need a break because they work 17 days in a row during the early voting period if we have Sundays. One thing you can do is say, I totally get that. I've got a couple of people here I talked with in my community who said they'd be willing to help. We can help staff Sundays. They're willing to volunteer, or we're willing to help you recruit to find people to work the polls to make sure we're able to open that site. Helping them solve the problems that are that might pop up when you're pushing for more expansive access is a great way to get the board to actually meet you halfway and do what your community needs. So it's another way that you can step up. Another thing that we hear a lot with expanding early voting access in certain parts of counties is parking is really difficult. This is a classic objection with college sites. You say, great, I understand that. Here's what we would propose. Here's how we think we can make it work. You can talk to the place, the community center or the college that you're talking about having an early voting site on and say, what can we do about parking? Start that conversation. Try to solve the problem. Don't give up when you hear the objection. Say, great, I hear you. How do we make that work? How do we make that work for our community? Stay engaged, follow up, try and solve problems, and follow through. What that does is it lets you prove that you are engaged, that your community really cares for and needs these early voting sites. And it helps the county board understand that you're asking them because you need it and that you care about it and you want to see it done for your community. That makes a big difference when it comes to talking to election officials. The last step that I'll share with you is at all stages of this, please, please, please report back to us. There's a reporting form. The links are on your screen right now. Um, Please fill that out. The more that our coalition knows what's happening, the better support that we can offer to you. Like I said, we all want to help and we're happy to help answer questions, give you tactics, research, strategy. But the more we know that's happening, the better we can do that. When you complete that form, and if you complete that form quickly, we can respond more quickly. We can respond in real time in many instances. We can highlight positive stories and share strategies and provide you with better and more relevant support. So please submit reports at every stage of this process, and we will help you as much as we can. Now I'll pass it back to Tyler.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. Um, we do have several resources that we're going to share with you, and I want to let you know you're going to get all this in an email after the training. So um, don't worry. But we have a resource from the Center for Inclusive Democracy. Um, and it is a tool that has a lot of data. It shows suggested areas for early voting sites, and it shows uh, demographic data to help with seeing where which areas may be good sites in your county. We also have 2022 general election early voting plans. Um, and this is, we're using this because it is the most comparable year to this year. In 2022, that was a general election, midterm election, general, it was a midterm election year, excuse me, and just like this year. And so um, that's the last comparable election. And we do have an Airtable that we will share with you, which has quite a few different resources. And I am going to pause the share for one moment so that I can quickly show you what this looks like. So we have this Airtable, and it's going to be updated as we get more information. But we do have some counties dates for when they plan to discuss their early voting plan. Um, and so you can see that there. We also have some counties that have told us just generally the month. They haven't gotten a date specifically scheduled. Um, and then we have a lot of other resources. I'm not going to go through all of these, but they are here for you. Um, we have the sites from 2022, the amount of weekend days from 2022, so that you can compare this to the plans that are introduced. And hopefully, we don't want to see reductions. So if you notice, we had a Sunday and an additional Saturday last time, but they're not offering that. That would be something to flag to the county board. And then we also have information on campus sites that were used in 2022, if there was a campus site used, and then contact information here for the county board, so you can ask them if you don't see their when they're going to be holding their discussion on early voting plans. You can contact them, and you can see their addresses there. And most county boards meet at their office, but not always. So you want to contact them, and you also want to make sure that you're contacting them to ensure that none of those dates change when they're having these discussions because they can change. Okay. Uh, just one moment as I get this back. Okay. Is everyone seeing the presentation slides again? Yes. Okay. All right. We're going to move on now to election funding advocacy. And obviously, these two things are very much interconnected because it is, as I said before, everything in elections has to be funded. And it is the funding from the county commissioners that funds these early voting sites and the poll workers that staff these sites and all the materials involved in a site, the machines, the ballots, all of that. So we are going to be focusing on five key areas, and that includes the impact of recent election law changes on election budgets. We'll explain why county election budgets matter and what your county board of elections does. Um, and we'll talk about the timeline for election funding this year, the process, um, how all of that works. We'll go over how to read county budgets. Um, and then we'll also talk about how to advocate for elections funding with your county commissioners. So I will turn it now back over to Chris to talk about election law changes.
Thanks, Tyler. In case you're not sick of hearing me talk yet, I'm going to talk just a little bit more to y'all about some of the changes that have been made and how that's going to affect the burdens that's being placed on county boards of elections, which in turn affects how much resources and money they have available for various things. So, um, recently, the General Assembly has changed some of the deadlines and timelines on which certain election processes need to be completed. Um, Generally, those changes have gone in one direction. They've made the time frames shorter. They've required the same amount of work to get done in less time. And what that's meant for county boards is something that they maybe used to have 2 weeks to do or 10 days to do. They now have maybe 5 days to do or 3 days to do, or sometimes even less. And they still have the same amount of work to do, but they have less time to do it in. Um, as most people can tell you, there are two ways to get something done, to spend more time or to have more people. If you have less time, you're going to have more people to get the same amount of work done. And what do more people take? They take more money. You need more money to pay those folks to help you work. So, let me go into the specifics of these changes a little bit. Senate Bill 382 is a law that was passed by the General Assembly. Um, I think it was just ahead of the municipals, but someone can correct me if that's not right. Um, in any event, it's been in effect for the last few cycles, but the 2026 general election this November is going to be by far the biggest, most popular, most hectic, largest number of votes election that the law has been in effect for. Um, And to add insult to injury, the General Assembly is currently considering making more tweaks to some of these changes. But as of now, Senate Bill 382 is what determines the various timeframes that we're going to talk about. So first, Senate Bill 382 severely limits the time that county boards have to research and review and for voters to cure provisional and mail ballots. Previously, counties had 9 days to research and contact voters who needed to provide photo ID, who needed a cure certification for their ballot to count, or who had cast a provisional ballot that the county needed to research to determine whether or not that voter was eligible to vote, and if so, for what races they were eligible to vote in. Um, so previously, counties had almost 2 full business weeks to conduct those processes. Post Senate Bill 382, voters now only have 2.5 days after the election to cure any issues with their ballots. So election day is on Tuesday. Voters now have until Friday at noon to cure issues with respect to their photo ID or any other missing information that they need to provide in order for their ballots to count. And it requires counties to finish processing all of those ballots along with the other types of provisional ballots that require research and administrative work from the county boards, but not necessarily additional information from the voter. Voters have until Friday at noon. The county boards have until Friday at 5. So the county boards get one extra afternoon to finish doing all of that work that previously they had done in almost 2 weeks of time. Um, Those of you who have monitored county boards pre-canvass meetings and canvass processes in the past know that provisional ballot review requires a ton of staff time and research. And so cutting that review period down to only 3 days will mean county boards need lots more staff support and thus more funding to process ballots correctly and accurately. Let me give an example. Um, the Cabarrus County Board of Elections sent a letter to Representative Jonathan Almond, who represents Cabarrus County, and he's a Republican on the House Election Law Committee. And the letter said that, excuse me, on average, each provisional ballot takes 5 to 7 minutes of staff time to research and process. And then after that initial research, another staff member does the same analysis to make sure that only eligible voters are allowed to vote, but that those who are allowed to vote will receive the correct ballot. Finally, provisional ballots are audited by precinct to make sure that all the provisionals that were completed are accounted for. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work to get done when you have hundreds of provisional ballots that need to be processed in the 3 days after the election while tons of other things are going on. The letter further urged Representative Almond to support increasing the amount of time that county boards have to review provisional ballots, to give them more than the 3 days that Senate Bill 382 had cut it to. It emphasized also that the state board's registration repair project, which concerns collecting some information that the state board hadn't asked people for in the past to try and update the voter registration records, that project has also led to an increase in time in processing provisional ballots because many of those voters are being processed as provisional voters, despite not really being who the provisional process is intended for. So many county boards of election are requesting additional part-time or full-time staff to meet these demands of the shortened provisional and absentee ballot review periods. It's absolutely critical for the 2026 election that the boards have enough funding to meet these new burdensome timeframes, including making sure that they have enough budgeted for staff or temporary hires. Um, to give another example, Durham County this past year hired a new ballot processing and audit manager to help manage the shorter time frame, a whole new managerial position to manage the burdens that were imposed by Senate Bill 382. In yet another example, Buncombe County out west said at their November 2025 canvass meeting that they needed to hire 10 to 20 additional seasonal workers to research provisional ballots because of the burdens imposed by Senate Bill 382. It's a lot of staff time. It's a lot of new people that you not only have to pay, but you have to take time to train, that you have to make sure are doing the process correctly, that are probably new to the process or at least new-ish to the process. That is all incredibly burdensome and difficult for the county boards to manage. This is things that takes resources to implement effectively and to not disenfranchise folks. But that's not the only change Senate Bill 382 made. Senate Bill 382 also required that all mail ballots that are received before Election Day have to be continuously counted starting at 5 p.m. Continuously, without stop. What does that mean? Do they get to stop at 2 a.m.? Under the terms of the law, no. They have to keep going if they haven't finished at 2 a.m. They have to keep going if they haven't finished at 3 a.m. They go until they're done. That change requires election officials to work nonstop, which requires increased funding, at the busiest time of their year, and in doing so could jeopardize the accuracy of the results in their counting, and at the very least will be incredibly burdensome. And those are just two of the changes from SB 382. Those are two of the big ones, but there's lots of different things that have happened. And what's more, the General Assembly is actively looking at changing more of these deadlines as we speak in the session that kicked off this week. We're monitoring the General Assembly for election legislation, which could lead to more changes and impact funding needs for those counties. We're monitoring that session that just kicked off. We're keeping a close eye on, for example, House Bill 958, which was introduced last year and could move this year. We also may see action at the federal or state level trying to impose additional requirements like documentary proof of citizenship to register, which is hugely burdensome that would disenfranchise many voters and create more administrative burden on the county boards to manage. And the General Assembly could make changes that we haven't thought of, that we're not contemplating. We are watching them to respond as quickly as we can to anything that is changed, to make sure that we can educate folks and support our county boards of elections as best as possible, but we don't know what they're going to do. All of these things have a direct impact on administering elections and cost every county money. So I'm going to turn it over to Marquez, who will explain further why these budgets matter and how the budgets can affect the way county boards fulfill their various duties.
Thank you, Chris. So yeah, I'm very tired just listening to all of the things that are associated with that bill. But when you just think about the normal, regular duties of the county boards of elections, it's a lot. So county boards of elections are in charge of administrating the administration of elections within their county. Every county board is made up of 5 board members, which votes on decisions and supervises the board staff. Each board has at least one elections director. Most counties have additional staff. Typically, the larger the county, the larger the staff. But there are some counties in which the director is the only full-time staff person. So let's think about the things that the county boards of elections is supposed to do. And it's a long list. They determine early voting and election day sites. They update voter rolls. They approve absentee ballot requests, certify election results, reviewing provisional ballots, equipping and staffing early voting sites, testing voting equipment, publicizing local elections. That's very important. Deciding voter challenges, auditing elections, deciding candidate challenges, and much, much more. So you can learn more about the duties of the county boards of elections by visiting ncsbe.gov/about dash elections slash county dash boards dash elections. It's important, and again, you'll get this link. It's important to recognize that county boards of elections, the work that they do is year-round work. It doesn't end after elections have been certified. County boards are always making preparations for the elections to come. Right now, each county across North Carolina is preparing for the 2026 general election. The funding allocated in the budget for the upcoming fiscal year 2026 through 27 will fund this midterm general election. So Michaela is going to inform us on how the impacts of the underfunding of elections and election advocacy funding successes.
Yes, thank you. So, as we can see, the County Board of Elections has a lot of work. And being an elections director is a really big job that has a lot of different responsibilities. And there was a really good investigation by the Carolina Public Press that uplifted critical issues happening in North Carolina's current process for funding county election boards. There have been over 60 changes in county election director positions in North Carolina since 2019. The Carolina Public Press investigation found that this was connected to low pay for election directors. According to Carolina Public Press, counties that have been paid the least or paid the least in relation to their population tended to have election directors in place for the least amount of time, while counties with the highest pay levels, especially in relation to their populations, tended to have the highest tenured directors. And so the North Carolina General Assembly set the minimum pay for county directors at only $12 an hour. The minimum pay has not been amended since 1999, before I was born. A 2024 analysis from the News and Observer shows that the election director salaries varied widely from just over $40,000 per year in Hyde and Graham counties to about $198,000 in Wake County. In 44 counties, the 2024 election director salary fell below a living income for one adult raising a child. Another quote from Robert Webb in Caswell County, the election director there, says a lot of long hours, frustration, and at times you do get to a point that it feels like there is no way you can do it all, but someone has to do this work. We have Patrick White, a former Alexander County election director, who says most people don't understand all the logistics and year-long preparations in order to have accurate and efficient elections. There are some successes. We know that from past research that there's a correlation between election funding and voter turnout. And the graph that you see on the presentation illustrates this. Each dot represents a North Carolina county. The horizontal y-axis shows voter turnout in 2022 by county. The vertical y-axis shows the amount each county spent per voter minus the national average. And out of those 83 counties that are illustrated here, Onslow County spent the least per voter and had the lowest turnout in 2022. And in surviving the margins, an election funding report from the Southern Coalitions for Social Justice, it's explained that Onslow County had among the highest differences between requested and approved budgets across the 6 fiscal years studied. But thanks to the election funding advocacy over the last couple years, Onslow has seen a substantial increase in funding. And during the last fiscal year, FY 2024 through 2025, Onslow County Commissioners approved a budget over 60% higher than the previous presidential election, which was 2020 through 2021. And this shows that advocacy can work, that the work that we do matters, each and every one of us and each and every one of you coming together. And by attending these public meetings and hearings and contacting our county commissioners, we really do make a real difference. How could more election funding make a difference in your county? Share your thoughts in the chat. Feel free to drop it. And to talk about the timeline for elections funding, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin.
Thanks so much, Michaela. Great to be back with y'all. We're going to talk about the process and the timeline. A lot of folks assume that county election boards are funded by the state, but the fact is that county commissioners fund your elections. And your county's annual budget is going to include funding, maybe too little, maybe too much, not enough, for your county board of elections, which includes this general election coming up on November 3rd. Funding election administration is a year-long prospect, as we just heard one of the directors quoted, and it can be a complex process. It does require bringing multiple funding streams together and identifying equipment and personnel needed to run our system. So let's talk about the timeline for this. Each county, all 100 counties in North Carolina, must pass an annual budget no later than July 1st. That might seem like a long way away, but it's not, right? That is because county fiscal years begin on July 1st and end on June 30th the following year. So the upcoming budget is going to be for the period beginning July 1st, 2026 and goes all the way through June 30th, 2027. This budget is called fiscal year 26-27, or you might see it written as FY 26-27. Working backwards from that deadline, each county has kind of their own timeline, sort of like early voting, right? There's a hard deadline at the end, and then some counties are going to start talking about it much, much sooner. In general, an election board's budget is proposed by your county board of elections, probably by the director, maybe the county manager, beginning in the winter or the spring before the next budget cycle. So many of them have already been talking about this for months. The budget then moves through the process, mostly behind closed doors with the county manager. But the public process begins by presenting the election budget to the county board of elections and then integrating that budget into the whole county county budget. So each county's budget has a lot of different items. Elections are one of those line items. Along the way, there are various opportunities for you to engage directly in that local budget process. From working with your Board of Elections director in the development of the budget, or connecting with your county commissioners and or your county manager to urge prioritization of funding for elections. As you see on the timeline, right around this time of year is when most counties are holding those budget meetings and holding those budget hearings. They are trying to get that budget approved right about right now, right? This is perfect timing for having this conversation. As an overview, your county board of elections director or your county manager prepares that budget, and then remember they present it to the county commissioners for consideration in the first 6 months of the year. We're already almost through the fourth month of the year, right? So it is coming up right now. The budget is going to be used, as we've talked about, for things like polling locations, if there's any kind of rental fees for those early voting sites or election day sites, things like staff and part-time staff or contract staff, and poll workers. Remember that every county board has to hire poll workers for every single election. It can also pay for things like building improvements. Some of the County Board of Elections offices have moved recently. Several of them are in new and improved county buildings. That costs money, right? Polling place materials, that can include new voting equipment, which there's a process for getting those approved as well. Those voting machines, ballots being printed, pens, right? Because all election sites have to have those black pens that we all love. Phones and any kind of security or safety. Um, the printing that they have to have the ATVs or the other things that are on site for those election days to go off without a hitch. It also includes voter education and hopefully educating all of us and outreaching to the public to make sure that all of us know the early voting plans and how to go cast their ballot. So we've talked a lot about why the county budgets matter and the timeline, which pro tip, it's right now, right? Now we're going to shift into what you can do. And I'm really thrilled to pass it over to our fellow nerd who wants to help you understand how to read a county budget. So I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer from NC Budget and Tax.
Hey y'all, I'm here to give a quick intro to reading budget documents and give you some tools to help y'all get started finding information about election funding in your county. So most county websites have a page dedicated to the budget, and larger urban counties tend to provide multiple documents and they present information a bit clearer for the public. And the most comprehensive type of document is usually called the budget book. It's often nicely designed and it has explanations and not just numbers. But in other, usually smaller counties, though, the budget is usually just a PDF version of the spreadsheet, so it can be harder to navigate. You may also encounter something called a budget ordinance, and that's the legislation that county commissioners pass to enact the budget. So for finding election funding, if your county publishes a comprehensive budget book, you should look for the dedicated funding summary for the Board of Elections. Budgets are usually organized by major spending categories, and elections almost always falls under general government. One thing that can be confusing, though, is that different counties use different terms for the same thing. So when you're identifying election funding, you might want to look for lines that are labeled county funds, general fund expenditures, and appropriations. Sometimes counties also separate election expenses into operations and costs, because they never make things easy for us. So you can just add that up and get the total, but I'll explain some of those terms on the next slide. Here are a few key terms that will help you read these documents. So first, we have the general fund. It's the main operating fund for government spending, and local election spending will almost always come from this. Revenue is the money the county is bringing in, most of which coming from taxes and then some fees. One thing you want to look out for is counties may receive reimbursements from municipalities if the county provides them election services or equipment. Then we have FTE employees, and this stands for full-time equivalent employees. This allows us to essentially count part-time, full-time, temporary staff in a standardized way so we can compare the number of employees across different departments. So I brought in some examples of real county budgets to give you all a sense of what they look like. So we'll start with Guilford County. It's a really good example of a comprehensive budget book. And they also provide resources like a reader's guide and glossary, which I recommend to everyone, even if you're not from Guilford, because it's just like a really digestible resource for navigating budget documents. And I have those linked in a slide for y'all. So within the document, you will see that each department has its own section explaining its responsibilities, and then it usually presents its funding in a table. So to navigate the budget book, you would just use the table of contents. It's pretty straightforward, and it will direct you to the Board of Election section. So here we're looking at a screenshot of the funding table in the Board of Election section. These tables often include a section like the one circled in red, and that allows you to compare funding across different years. So in the first column on the left, you see actual spending from fiscal year 2024, meaning what the county actually spent versus like what they adopted that year originally. Um, the next column shows the fiscal year 2025 adopted and amended budgets. So sometimes budgets are amended mid-year if needs or revenue changes, but in this case, they ended up spending about $50,000 less than expected on personnel. So that's the change you see there in green. And then the next column is fiscal year 2026's adopted budget. And the very last column shows the percent change from the previous fiscal year 2025 to the current fiscal year 2026 budgets. So if we just focus in on the fiscal year 2026 column, the key numbers to note here are revenue, expenses, and county funds. So the county funds line is that's what represents the truly local dollars going to the Board of Elections. And that's just calculated by subtracting the revenue from expenses. And then on the next slide, I have an example from Nash County, which is kind of at the other end of the spectrum. Nash only publishes their budget ordinance, which again is the legislation that county commissioners pass to approve the budget. So in these ordinances, you'll typically see a list of the types of revenue that go into the general fund, and then a list of expenditures across departments and services. You don't have to mind all of that. You just need to look for the line that says election or Board of Elections. And in this example, it's a good example of a county that separates its election expenses into operations and costs. So we can add these two categories together and understand that they passed about like 719K in election funding for this fiscal year. To close, if you ever can't find a public budget document or find anything in it confusing, do not hesitate to reach out to the people that represent you in your community, whether it be your policymakers or people at the county office. This is public information that you're entitled to. It's their job to make this information available to you as their constituents. So thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Tyler.
Thank you, Jennifer. So, we've talked about county budgets, how to read a budget. We've talked about election law changes. We've talked about what the county boards do with all that funding. So now we're going to talk about how to advocate to county commissioners for elections funding. So you want to attend County Board of Elections meetings to get information on funding and what the county needs. Oftentimes, you'll see the Board of Elections director will give updates and provide information about possibly staff positions that have been requested or materials that have been requested that the director has put in their budget. So these are things that you can pick up on at meetings, and that helps in determining, what the counties what the county boards of elections are asking their commissioners for. You want to meet with or call your county board of elections director and the county board of elections members. When you contact them, ask them about their budget priorities and needs, and this will help you learn where your advocacy can support election funding and election administration. You want to ask for a copy of the budget that the County Board of Elections requested, and then you can share that with us. Please share it with us in our reporting forms, and we'll make sure to put those links in the email that you'll get, the follow-up email. That helps us keep track of the requests from the county boards. And we can help answer any questions that you may have about those budget requests. And then the next thing you'll want to do is find out when your county commissioners are having their budget public hearing. Each county commission is required to have a public hearing on their county budget. Information on this can be found on your county commissioner's website, and we are going to provide a resource with meeting dates for you. Again, you're going to get this in a follow-up email that has meeting dates for county commissioner meetings. One of the things you'll see is that there is a meeting in which the county manager presents the budget. There is a meeting in which there's a public hearing on the budget, and then usually there is another meeting for adopting the budget. Although sometimes the counties can schedule, and I believe it was referenced in the chat, they can schedule a, um, a adopting the budget at the same meeting in which they have the public hearing, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense because ideally you want to get comments and feedback from the public, and review that before you approve a budget. But you know, even if you can't get to one of these meetings, or even if you do go to one of these meetings, you can also provide comments through emailing your county commissioners and the county manager and let them know, what you want to see, and that you want your county board of elections to get the funding that they have requested. Um, and yeah, I'll talk more about. We've got lots of resources to help you with this, which I'll talk about later on. Um, and it's important to remember that your county commissioners are the ones that approve the final budget. And hearing from advocates like you is crucial to securing strong elections budgets. Um, and then after the budget is approved, you'll want to get the budget and then follow up with the County Board of Elections director and ask if they have received the funding that they've requested. Um, and again, share it with us. You can um, fill out a report for us to help is invaluable in helping us track where there are gaps and how the counties are getting the funds that they need or not getting the funds possibly. So um, by committing to being an election funding advocate, you are helping increase the funding for your neighbors in your community ahead of elections this year. And it is all a part of our year-round uh, election advocacy, which includes early voting advocacy, which we talked about before, and then canvass monitoring and election protection. All right, now I'm going to pass it to my colleague Sailor Jones to talk about an example in Guilford County um, where we had a big success with election funding and early voting. So turn it over to you, Sailor.
Thank you, Tyler, and really appreciate folks being here tonight for what can be stuff that for some feels like incredibly in the weeds. And I'm seeing a lot of folks in the chat saying, how much they appreciate it, how much the information is helpful. We also want to share with you how we win in these circumstances. And fortunately, North Carolina voters are very well experienced to overcome the types of challenges we've been talking about with these shifts of power in our elections. So, what does committing to step up for voters look like in an environment of what feels like unprecedented attacks on voting elections, right? Well, coincidentally, it can and should look a lot like it did 10 years ago when voters in every county of North Carolina banded together to protect early voting options, and then the process saved every Sunday voting option in the entire state. And we're going to tell you how they did that. The advocacy in 2016, I don't know if a lot of y'all remember this, but it was fueled back then when a leaked memo revealed the state Republican Party had asked all the Republican county boards of elections members to slash options for voters they didn't like. And using the lessons learned from the civil rights movement, I want to give a shout out to Guilford County. They knew exactly how to fight back. And it was in many ways we're talking to today and win better for their community. So if you're from Guilford, let us show us some love in the chat. Y'all were really the kind of instigators of some great advocacy 10 years ago that pushed back against cuts to early voting. I remember hundreds of people were marching past the home of the Greensboro sit-ins 50 years before to pack the house at a county board of elections meeting and speak, and in some cases sing with one voice to demand the board protect the voting options they deserved. Over 300 people, friends, 300 people. So many people they had to move the meeting space, shouted down any efforts to slash weekend hours, campus sites, and all the other options that the community was serving. And through their tenacity, through public comment, and their sheer numbers, residents forced the members of the County Board of Elections to hold the line on a plan. Imagine it, 25 early voting sites, friends, saving Sunday voting, saving multiple campus options. And in some, because they showed up at those meetings in mass, there were additional 7 days of ballot access that they would not have had if they had not shown up at that meeting. Now, immediately following, those same protesters, the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the community members who really showed up from Guilford County, they took to the public square right out front of the meeting space and held an impromptu but a very powerful press conference. And that not only celebrated what they had done on the inside to save all their early voting options, but it encouraged their neighbors statewide to pack these same county meetings and seek the same people-powered results. So after Guilford showed up and won, a majority of other counties, large and small, I remember they were in Mecklenburg packing the house and Halifax County packing the house. They listened, they took action, and made sure, regardless of the outcome, the boards couldn't say that people were quiet on what they wanted for their county. And so it worked. In the process, all counties protected every Sunday voting option available in the state at that time. Imagine it. The board had the majority to cut those Sunday options, but because people showed up in mass and brought journalists with them, brought the traditional media with them, brought influencers in their community, we were able to get the word out very quickly that these pack the house meetings were happening. And when people showed up, it mattered. So fast forward to today, and we can see very clearly that without those same cuts at the state and local levels, they could happen without us. After all, we saw how election officials ignored student voters' demands for campus sites at A&T, and they ended them in Western Carolina, not to mention new cuts to weekend options that working voters can use most. So my question to you is, based on all that you've heard tonight, what are you willing to do? And are you willing to do what they did 10 years ago to win what we want right now? Are you fired up to make calls to the county commissioners and county elections directors to find out what's on their agenda? Are you fired up to recruit as many people as you can to join you at all of those meetings? Are you fired up enough to pledge today to make it your singular focus over the next few months to be there at those meetings, speak up at those meetings when and where decisions are being made for voters that impact your entire county? Because a lot of people are thinking they need to fight for good voting in July, August, September. The fight for voting is happening right now. So, will you make sure that the media makers in your community, the networks, the journalists, the influencers you know, are there to be with you to cover it all? Because if you show up in your county, we have proven that everybody has cover to show up in their county and make their voices heard. So show me in the chat if you're ready to show up, like my friends have said, to make those calls, like my friends have said, to get the public comment juices flowing on what early voting sites you need, how much you want
Woo!
your
Fired
experienced
up, ready
director
to
pays.
go.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. It doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there, friends. Carol is in the chat saying they're going to show up to a Fayetteville County Board of Elections meeting, pack the house to save their experienced director. This is what we're asking you to do now in your neck of the woods. It doesn't stop now. Every month from now until the end of the year, and there's a slide on there that shows a menu of options. We're just on the appetizer stage of our fight, right? Every month from now until the end of the year, there's a way for you to fight and win for fair elections. Election funding advocacy starts now, followed immediately by early voting advocacy that my friends have talked about. It sets us on a course for your participation in what we're calling a year-round comprehensive civic engagement as resistance. And you are on the front lines of that resistance, friends, to not only help yourself with the sites that you love, but to help your neighbors, knowing that they're thinking about elections months down the road. We have to think about it right now. So, with the tools and resources we have, you can show your power of fighting back with the scripts, showing up, making calls, getting everyone you know to pack those meetings. As Carol knows so well and as Tyler knows so well, those things work. So, Tyler, will you close us out by sharing some of these next steps that folks need in terms of resources, and so that every nice person on this call is prepared to invite 100 of their closest friends to their county board of elections meeting and their county commission meeting to make sure we have the funding and sites we deserve. So Tyler, can you take it away?
I will. Thank you so much, Sailor. That is a great way to uplift us all. I know I'm fired up after listening to that. So we are almost at the end here, but we've come to the time where we're showing you the tools and resources that we have to share, and all of these things you are going to get in an email. So just know that. But we have a budget tracker, and this is a calendar that will show upcoming budget meetings for county commissioners. It does include all those meetings I talked about, the date that the county manager presents the budget, the public hearing date, the date that the commissioners are planning to adopt the budget. It also has some other data in there, including we had that graph we showed earlier that showed the amount that each county spent per voter. We've got that information here, so you can use that in your advocacy. Um, and then we also have in there a link to the county commissioner's website, so you can find the contact information to email your commissioners. And we also have provided the email and the phone number for your county clerk. So if you don't see the date for the budget public hearing or any of those dates on this tracker, you can contact the county clerk, and they will let you know when those dates are coming. Or if you want any additional information, like you want a copy of the budget, you can contact the county clerk. They should be able to get that information for you. We have a directory of North Carolina county clerks. Speaking of such, so we'll share that with you. Um, as well. So it's included in the Airtable. There's also a PDF that we have that we will share with you. We have a resource that covers how to contact local election officials and build relationships with them. And so this is a guide to help you in giving public comment. Um, and it's a really great resource. So I would encourage you to review that before going to a public hearing or sending that comment via email or however you choose to do it. We also have a report from the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, Surviving at the Margins. Um, and this report includes years of elections funding research and on lots of different stories. Uh, and I think it's really helpful. Uh, we also have we talked about Carolina Public Press before, and you saw some of um, the research from their investigation that was highlighted in our training. We have a link to their full three-part investigative series, which is really fantastic. So a big shout out to them for that work. And um, I also want to share um, we have in the Blueprint for a Stronger Democracy, we have articles in there that talk about expanding early voting and adequately funding our elections that provide a nice overview of really a lot of what we talked about today and why early voting is important, why funding our elections are important. So, and we also, I'll just drop these links in the chat. Um, you can go to ccnc.me/election hub or dimnc.co/elections advocacy. Um, and those sites are going to be updated with resources throughout the year, as Sailor said, so that we are all equipped um, to advocate for elections year round. Um, so we do have a survey here that we would love for you to fill out. And we'll put the link in the chat. You can also scan the QR code with your phone. And we want to know um, how helpful this training has been for you. We hope it's been helpful. And so we would really ask that you fill that out. Um, and let us know um, how the training went and what you've learned. Um, so um, with that, I am going to turn it over to Jennifer to share a few more resources. So we're not done, folks. We've got more for you.
It'll all help you though. So first, the Budget and Tax Center just published our updated economic county snapshots for 2026, which provides key economic and other indicators of well-being for all 100 counties. So if you want to learn more about how your county's doing in terms of employment, income, affordable housing, and more, you might ask, what does this have to do with elections and election funding? But to connect the dots here, I want to point out that the people we put into power through our elections are the ones making policy decisions that are shaping our everyday life. And this is a good tool for seeing how policies are shaping your county. On the next slide, Common Cause and BTC just published an election funding explainer that gives an overview of what election funding entails and why it's important. So you should check that out. And the last thing, we also compiled links to the current budget for all counties that have made them available online at least. And that will also be sent in the follow-up email. But this will be a good head start for y'all to check out election funding in your county. So I'll give it back to Tyler to close it out.
Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer. And again, you're going to get all these resources in an email following up. So just to close us out, please use those reporting forms, dimnc.co/BOE report form, ccnc.me/CBOE report. It goes to the same website. So when you're going to County Board of Elections meetings, um, or you're going to County Commissioner public hearings on the budget, we want to know what is happening. And so please fill out those the forms to help us out. And you can volunteer to monitor county boards of elections year round. And the links are there. And again, we're going to share these links with you. So I know we are at 7:30. We are over time. But if folks want to stay, if you have questions, then we will hang around a little bit. I know we had a lot of information for you, early voting and election funding advocacy that we tried to pack into this, and we wanted to do that because all of this is happening at the same time. So we thought it was important to combine these two together. But yeah, are there any questions that folks have? Any questions that may have been in the chat that weren't answered?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hey, y'all. I'm not sure if it's a rumor or what part of this is true or not true. Are the Board of Elections going to print or give us voter registration cards? I've been on a million of these. Some said no, some said yes, some said we have to print them ourselves, some said they're going to use them until they run out. So what is the actual answer?
I can answer that, Carol. Thank you so much. The State Board of Elections did make an announcement this year, and I think I did drop the link in the chat. Maybe I know the chat was moving very fast there, but we can send that around. What happened was the State Board of Elections announced that they will no longer be fulfilling bulk orders to groups like ours. So if you are in the habit of requesting forms in bulk from the State Board of Elections, they will not fulfill those anymore. The county boards will give you forms though. So all 100 counties have a county boards. Um, the state wants the county to handle that, and some of them are already run out. And so there is a problem, and it is sort of related to what we're talking to tonight, but we could have a whole nother conversation about that. I can send you the email and follow up. If you're having trouble finding forms, I would A, contact us that you can vote. We can offer forms for groups that can't get their hands on them. But also let us know because we are tracking that similar to all the stuff that you just heard. You can tell we love an Airtable, right? We love to track counties. So we have an Airtable of that information. And if you're hearing that counties have run out, let us know. And remember that we have same day registration. That's exactly right what Sailor said. Voter registration is critical for North Carolina. This always is the busiest season in summer and fall. For folks who can't get registered, can't find a form, can't use the online portal because they might not have a DMV ID, go to early voting, right? Part of what we were all just talking about. Early voting is the best option for every single person because it's the most convenient. It has same day registration. Um, send people to early voting. So, and I know there were also, I just want to add one more final thing. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of proposals that could change even more so, like the last 4 digits right now is only required, but there's proposal about full nine and all that. There's a registration repair project. You've probably heard about the SAVE database. Again, lots of things are happening. The best thing that you can do is come to trainings like this, get on our email listserv. We will keep you updated. And don't share false information that hasn't happened yet, right? Please try to help us share fact-based information, ComCause, Democracy NC, You Can Vote, SCSJ, Budget and Tax, Black Alliance. We are here for you and we will equip you with the best and most up-to-date information. So keep coming to these things. And if you're hearing of your county not having them, you can use that report form or email any one of us. You have all of our contact information.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Can we print those forms?
Yeah, you can also print them. I would just caution that remember that they should be two-sided because it's a big form and it should be in color. So that can be a barrier. Again, if you're having trouble, you can reach out to our groups. You can vote. We have a box at our office right now. So we are happy to help and I can ship you some if you don't have any.
Thank you.
And they had to be in color because the red part is in color. You can't use black and white ones because those highlight the
required sections are highlighted on voter registration forms. Yep.
Yep.
And I'll just also add, in addition to all the required sections, I highly recommend for anybody who is registering to provide their contact information on the form so that if there is any issue with the registration, with processing the registration, the County Board of Elections can contact the registrant. Any other questions?
Hey, this was a great session, Tyler. I probably need. I'm going to put my email and phone number in the chat because I'm going to need some support for our organization, Capital Area 6 NCNW, so for our social justice work, committee work here in Wake County. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Last chance for questions.
Great job.
Thank you.
All right, I think we'll end it there then. Well, thank you all so much. I hope this has been helpful. Again, please fill out that survey if you can. And again, we will share all the resources. You'll get a recording of this training, and please have a wonderful evening and a fantastic rest of the week.